Welcome! Today I look into 3 ingenious uses of 3D CG in video games. Let's get into it. Guilty Gear is a 2D fighting game that employs an industrial, rock-tinged anime art style with dystopian, eerie, and kooky elements to its games. With a plethora of unique colours and characters, the series stands on its own as one of Arc System Works' most interesting games in its roster. 2D sprites were introduced to video games in the 1970s. However, with the rising costs of creating detailed 2D sprites from the 90s onwards, the video game industry had no choice but to pivot to 3D graphics. This change became a cost-effective and efficient way to render and animate characters in-game, in real time, and for pre-rendered sequences too. Compared to games like Capcom's Street Fighter and SNK's The King of Fighters, which had a disjointed shift from 2D sprites to 3D CG in the late 90s and 2000s, with varying and sometimes polarizing results, Guilty Gear had a very seamless transition into 3D CG with the release of 2014's Guilty Gear Xrd, 15 years after its first game. The talented 3D artists and animators at Arcsys successfully transitioned to cel-shading, keeping the art style and refusing to compromise on quality. This shows that despite Capcom and SNK probably having larger development budgets than Arcsys, this did not equal them having more insight or knowledge on tackling this issue. But what is cel-shading? In simple terms, cel-shading is an intricate 3D visual style that uses computers to create a hand-drawn 2D look and is often used in Japanese animation. This allows for creating smoother block colors and shadows. The key to this style is altering the way light falls across a 3D model, giving the illusion of a hand-drawn animation. This style saves time and allows for more control in animating a sequence. Demonstrated at the 2015 Game Developers Conference by technical artist Junya C. Motomura of Arc System Works' Red Team, the game was created in Unreal Engine 3, developed by Epic Games. For the game's 3D models to look like 2D sprites, they handcrafted the lighting and shading for each character, intentionally limited animation, and keyed animations by hand. To quote Motomura, to get a conventional 2D look, everything on screen has to be an intentional choice, not just a result of calculation.
For those curious, here's a comparison between full animation and limited animation. Let's have a look. This is how a full animation with interpolation would look like. And here is how limited animation would look. Simply having more frames, it's obvious that the full animation looks a lot smoother. However, it's more apparent that it's actually 3D compared to the limited animation version. The limited animation version may look less smooth, but has more distinctive poses, easier to recognize.
Since then, this philosophy has maintained the game's style and flair. I've yet to see a game adapt these intricacies. For a full, detailed analysis, the full conference link is in the description. Released in 1996, the original Tomb Raider game innovated 3D technology in the action-adventure game genre due to its third-person perspective and created an impact on the game industry. Amongst the undeniable impact Lara Croft has within the video game space, and countering the burly, buff lead men seen in such games, part of what made Tomb Raider impressive was Lara's fluid character animations. Although her movement was slower compared to later iterations, Tomb Raider creator Toby Gard made this imperative and intentional for character immersion. He stated, "I was very keen to get Lara to animate properly, which no one else at the time was doing. This made her move slowly but look realistic, which helped the player empathize with her." Despite the video game industry's gradual adoption of motion capture in the 90s, all character animations were done and coordinated by hand. This is apparent in how Croft pushes and interacts with other objects and environments, something that would have been impossible to emulate using motion capture at the time. Of course, this is not a new technique, but I thought this was done in a clever and effective way. Created by Square and released in 2000 for the PlayStation, the action-adventure RPG game Vagrant Story had its 20th anniversary in 2020. Thanks to the research of Twitter user Dreambaum and the translation work of a 1999 developer interview by Schmupulations, they highlighted what made the game pivotal in the early 2000s. Part of it was its ingenious approach to 3D models. Due to the PS1's limited polygon count and memory size, the animation team at Square had to think outside of the box. The Final Fantasy Tactics team, who worked on the 1997 game, also worked on Vagrant Story. And surprisingly, they had no experience in 3D, which makes this even more intriguing. They used their knowledge of 2D animation and methods to create optical tricks and illusions that gave character models more detail and imitate head and mouth movements in a 3D setting. Using sub-pixel shading to achieve this, artist Eiichiro Nakatsu had a background in pixel art and used this to create these expressions himself. In a 1999 interview, art director and character model supervisor Hiroshi Minagawa stated, "Well, take a character's smile. We used a single row of pixels to depict that, but the problem is, say you then want to show the character's mouth opening. If you suddenly increase that mouth line to 2 pixels wide, it won't look smooth. Our solution was to animate it by subtly changing the shading of the individual pixels." Nakatsu here did almost all of the facial expressions, going on to say that this wouldn't have been possible without him. Lighting on the characters was achieved by creating secondary 3D models, lightening them and slightly moving them to the direction of the light source. For the environments, they used vertex colors, where lighting the color is computed for each vertex and then interpolated between vertices to brighten or darken 3D textures, all done without a lighting engine. With such graphical limitations, they were able to create a body of work that not only took trial and error, but tricking and experimentation. Amazing! And those were 3 ingenious uses of 3D CG I've come across in video games. Were there any that stood out to you, made you question your reality? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.